Hello, my name is Dr. Joanna Krongold, and I'm a lecturer and educator in Holocaust Studies and Anti-Semitism at the University of Toronto. I'm currently working on addressing anti-Semitism in health professions education and practice through the Anne Tannenbaum Center for Jewish Studies, the Wilson Center for Research and Education, and the Temerty Faculty of Medicine's Office of Inclusion and Diversity. I'd like to begin this introduction to the Holocaust and physicians' role in the Nazi genocide with a quotation. "The Holocaust did not begin with killing, it began with words." This powerful statement was issued by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in response to a 2016 white supremacist rally held in Washington, D.C. It's worth returning to this statement, looking closely at it, and really asking yourself what it means as you pursue careers in the medical professions. How does language affect our understandings of the world, and how do those understandings change how we approach a topic like the role of physicians in the Holocaust? In order to think through some of these questions, it's important to remember that the Holocaust was not a predetermined or preordained genocide. The people living and dying through it certainly had no way of knowing the outcome, of knowing what we know now. That the Nazis built an ideology of racial purity within Germany, that they used pseudo-scientific medicine to support and implement the application of this ideology, and that they persecuted, isolated, imprisoned, and ultimately murdered approximately 6 million Jews in the name of this ideology. Words have the power to lay the groundwork for prejudice and persecution, and can also be employed to enact oppression and destruction. Because of this, it's important to be careful and precise with words as we approach this topic today, just as it's important for you to be careful and precise in your practice of medicine. Language matters, and I'd like to share with you some of the ways that it mattered to the health professions during the Holocaust, and some of the ways that it matters to how we talk about these issues today. Given how important it is to be careful with words, I first want to make it clear what I mean when I talk about the Holocaust. When I refer to the Holocaust, I mean the systematic persecution, oppression, and annihilation of Jews by the Nazis before and during World War II. Many people often ask how the Holocaust could have happened. There were certainly many complex sociopolitical, cultural, and ideological factors that contributed to it, including the collapse of Germany's economy and military in the wake of World War I. As a result, many scholars date the beginning of the Holocaust to 1933, when Adolf Hitler was democratically elected as Chancellor of Germany and soon became the Führer of the Third Reich. After 6 years of steady armament, the amassing of political power, and the escalation of bigotry, restrictions, and violence, Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, marking the beginning of World War II. Combining an ideology of racial supremacy and living space, one that focused on military expansion coupled with the so-called purification of the Aryan people, Nazi Germany conquered, occupied, and violently besieged many European countries until Germany's defeat in 1945. Jews were the primary target of Nazi aggression, and anti-Semitism was central to Hitler's policy and political platform. Anti-Semitic ideology and action grew and adapted over the course of the war, but other groups were also oppressed, abused, violated, and murdered throughout the Nazi regime. Roma and Sinti people, homosexuals, political prisoners, the disabled, communists, asocials, dissident academics, and many other groups were targeted. Ghettos were created throughout Europe as places in which to concentrate large populations of Jews who were forced to live in atrocious conditions. Starvation and disease ran rampant in the ghettos, and Jews were faced with the constant threat of being deported to concentration camps and killing centers, many of which were located in occupied Poland. Again, language is important here. There is a difference between concentration camps and killing centers, although some locations, such as Auschwitz-Birkenau, served both functions. Concentration camps were prisons constructed to incarcerate and extract labor from Jewish prisoners while starving them to the point of death. In contrast, killing centers, as the name suggests, were meant for one purpose: the murder of the individuals who were sent there. The largest and most well-known killing center and concentration camp hybrid is Auschwitz-Birkenau, at which over 1 million people were murdered. Many other killing centers, such as Treblinka, Sobibor, Majdanek, Belzec, and Chełmno, had incredibly high death rates as well, and were established near cities in Poland with large Jewish populations, for example, Warsaw, Lodz, and Lublin. In this time, words were corrupted, manipulated, and used as weapons against Jews. Anti-Semitic language positioned Jews as subhuman, as rats, vermin, parasites. At the same time, Jews were seen as superhuman, somehow possessing the ability to control government and commerce, infiltrating the highest echelons of society in order to gain more money and power. Both of these egregious stereotypes still exist in ever-changing guises to this day, and demonstrate how Jews can be transformed into scapegoats. This was certainly the case in Nazi Germany. As such, it was important at the time for the Nazis to define their terms, to know who counted as a Jew, and to target them for isolation and persecution. With the introduction of the Nuremberg Laws in 1935, Jews were subjected to a steady ostracization from society. This led Jews to experience what has become known as social death, the destruction of their humanity and their integration in society before their physical deaths. The idea of social death was originally introduced by the sociologist Orlando Patterson to describe the treatment of enslaved peoples, and was applied to the situation of Jews in Nazi Germany by the historian Marion Kaplan. This lineage emphasizes the importance of context, of cross-pollination of ideas between different fields, and of the precision of language. But in Nazi Germany, a lot of emphasis was also placed on the imprecision of language. What I mean by that is that the language of the Holocaust was rife with euphemism. Think about the words that are often associated with the Holocaust: action, selection, deportation, euthanasia, the final solution to the Jewish question. These words are not saying what they really symbolize: the targeting and murder of Europe's Jewish population. They are metaphors, stand-ins. So once again, language really matters, and this is very clear in the close relationship between medicine and the Holocaust. A biomedical vision of the world was incredibly important to the overall Nazi project. In Nazi ideological propaganda, anti-Semitism was directly linked to what was known as racial hygiene. Jews were seen as a disease inflicted on the healthy body of the Aryan state, and the only way to ensure the state's well-being was to cure the disease. In this way, killing was justified through the expression of medical anti-Semitism, medical healing of the state body. At this point, it's important to note that the first victims of the Holocaust were actually the disabled, undesirable people who were labeled as life unworthy of life. These people, many of whom were children, were subjected to forced sterilization and eventually so-called euthanasia, or mercy killing. Of course, this was not mercy killing, it was just killing. But many doctors participated in what became known as the T4, or euthanasia program, justifying their actions because of their belief in race science. If they called it mercy killing, if they used the language of medicine, disease, and healing, they could understand their actions as fulfilling their Hippocratic oaths and preserving the well-being of deserving members of society. The conspiracy theories and propaganda that positioned Jews as sexual degenerates and medical perversions allowed these doctors to reconcile their actions with their status as healers. In fact, many doctors joined the Nazi Party, in greater numbers than many other professions. As those entering the medical profession, it's important for you to think about the implications of authority that come with being a physician and the slippery slope from authority to authoritarianism in medicine. This is not to say that other professions did not participate in the Nazi project. Of course they did. But it was doctors who had the ability and authority to perform medicalized killing, to enact racial science to deadly effect. What many doctors learned about medicalized murder from the T4 or euthanasia program, they applied to the destruction of Jews as the Holocaust progressed. This kind of murder was very different from militarized killings or shootings performed by special units that followed the Eastern Front of the war effort. This was a very specific form of killing that relied on and involved doctors in order to succeed. It was doctors who selected who was to die and who was to live when new shipments of prisoners arrived in concentration camps and killing centers. It was doctors who performed brutal experiments on prisoners in the name of medical science, including sexual and genital mutilation, perverse studies on twins, and physical torture to determine how much pain, disease, and disfigurement a human body could endure before death. And it was doctors who oversaw the precise operation of the gas chambers, enclosed rooms into which lethal gas was pumped, slowly and painfully suffocating all those who were inside. At the height of the Holocaust, these gas chambers operated all day and all night. Jewish prisoners were forced to herd those selected for death inside the gas chambers, and then, once they had been murdered, transfer the dead bodies to a specially constructed crematorium. They had to do this, knowing full well that they too would soon be subjected to the same fate. Nazi doctors were not just passive observers in the Holocaust, they were active participants. Medical science allowed for the murder of millions of people, and medical language allowed doctors to justify it. How is compassion subverted by veiled language in medical practice today? How do doctors distance themselves from the consequences of their work by relying on stereotypes and euphemisms? Studying the Holocaust demonstrates the horrific side of a profession meant to do no harm, and how those calling themselves healers were able to enact mass murder.